Something changed in America this year. Not loudly, not violently, not with protests or breaking news banners. Most people went about their day without noticing anything different. But for a specific group of people, a routine moment suddenly felt strange. A grocery cart, a checkout line, a familiar item. And then, it didn't go through. At first, it looked like a glitch, a card error, a system issue, but it wasn't. And what caused it matters far more than the item itself, because this wasn't an accident. And it wasn't temporary. For a long time, food assistance in the United States followed an unspoken rule. If you qualified for help, you were trusted to decide how to use it. There were limits, of course. Alcohol was out, cigarettes were out, hot prepared meals were out. But beyond that, choice mattered. Not because every choice was healthy, but because autonomy was considered part of dignity. That philosophy shaped policy for decades, quietly, until recently. Over the past year, something unusual started happening behind the scenes. State governments began submitting requests to Washington, not for more funding, not for expansion, but for permission to restrict, not the amount of help people receive, but how they're allowed to use it. At first, these requests didn't get much attention. They were technical, administrative, easy to ignore, until the approvals started coming back. On January 1st, several states activated new rules. No national announcement, no unified messaging. Each state worded it differently. Some focused on nutrition, some on public health, some on responsible spending. But the result was the same. Certain foods were no longer allowed, not banned from stores, not illegal to buy, just unavailable to some people. Here's where the story gets interesting. If this were really about health, the changes would be sweeping. They would target ultra-processed meals. They would target sugar-loaded packaged foods. They would target fast food. But that didn't happen. The restrictions were narrow, selective, symbolic, which tells us this wasn't designed to overhaul nutrition. It was designed to send a signal. Think about how policy often works. Big changes don't arrive all at once. They arrive in pieces, tested quietly, rolled out in places where resistance is low. That's exactly what's happening here. A small number of states first, a limited list of items, a careful justification, because once a precedent is established, the conversation changes. It's no longer should this exist? It becomes how far should it go? Let's pause on something important. The people affected by these rules didn't suddenly change their habits. They didn't wake up healthier or unhealthier. The environment didn't improve. Access didn't expand. Only the rules did. And rules don't change behavior in a vacuum. They change pressure. Imagine standing in line at a store. The item you've always bought is still there. The price hasn't changed. The shelf hasn't moved. But now the system tells you, this one doesn't count. Nothing feels dramatic, but everything feels different. Because now the boundary is visible. And visible boundaries do something powerful. They redefine who gets to choose. Supporters of these changes say they encourage better decisions. Critics say they ignore reality. Both arguments miss the deeper shift. This is the first time the government isn't just helping with food, but actively deciding what counts as acceptable food for a specific group of people. That distinction matters a lot. Historically, assistance programs focused on eligibility. Do you qualify or not? Now the focus is shifting. Do your choices qualify? That's a completely different framework. It turns support into supervision. And supervision always grows. There's another detail rarely discussed. People don't stop wanting things because a system disallows them. They adapt. They pay with cash instead. They stretch benefits thinner. They cut something else. So the policy doesn't remove the behavior. It redistributes stress. And stress doesn't produce healthier outcomes. It produces exhaustion. The most telling part of this story isn't what was restricted. It's how easily it happened. No mass debate, no national vote, no cultural reckoning, just quiet approvals and quiet enforcement, which should make anyone pause. Because when major changes arrive quietly, it means they're considered safe to normalize. Here's something else worth thinking about. Rules introduced for specific groups rarely stay there. History shows us this pattern over and over. What begins as targeted oversight becomes standardized management, not because of malice, but because systems prefer consistency. And once a control mechanism exists, it looks for new justifications. At least 18 more states are now preparing similar changes. Different wording, different timelines, same direction. This isn't a rollback. It's an expansion. Some people will say this is necessary. Others will say it's paternalistic. But the more important question is this: what does it say about a society when assistance comes with moral judgment? When help is conditional not just on need, but on behavior? That question doesn't have an easy answer, but it has consequences. This story isn't really about food. Food is just the surface. It's about trust. Who is trusted to decide for themselves, and who isn't? It's about how quietly systems can redefine freedom without ever saying the word. And it's about how small, reasonable changes can reshape expectations over time. If this affected you directly, you already understand the weight of it. If it didn't, don't assume it never will. Policies tested quietly today often become standards tomorrow, especially when nobody's watching. The loudest changes get debated, the quiet ones get accepted, and it's usually the quiet ones that matter most.